Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. In today's project I'm making a Japanese KAIKEN Tanto, type of short sword carried by the samurai. The steel I'm using is W2 flat bar, and I started out making the notches and then the tang. And I'm just forging out the tang, and then once I was done with that I started forging the tip of the blade. There, I'm just trying to get the best profile I can, trying to keep it as flat as I can while getting the basic shape that I wanted. You hammer out the cutting edge, it curves the blade back. So then you have to forge out on the back side, on the spine, to straighten the knife out. And what I was going for here was a straight blade with no curve. But once I had the blade forged, it was over to the grinder, smoothing out the edges. And I'm cleaning up the notches, trying to get those squared off. So I'm just using a hacksaw there to cut the little ends of those notches off. Once I had them cut with the hacksaw and squared off, I used a hand file to smooth out those edges and try and get them as clean as I could. And here I'm marking the center line of the cutting edge so that I can take the knife over to the grinder and start getting my bevels. So my plan here was to leave some of the forge marks in the blade. So I didn't grind my bevels on both sides of the blade to completely remove all those forge marks. I left some of them in, and I just did some hand sanding to get the rough marks out of the blade. I was using a 40 grit sanding belt, and I went up to an 80 grit sandpaper to try and get some of those marks out. There I'm drilling the hole in the tang. So this is one of the mistakes I made. I should have waited and did this when I was assembling the handle, just so I could get a better fit up with the wood handle. This is the Habaki that I'm starting here. When I made my notches, I made them a little too deep, and the thickness of the copper that I had wasn't going to be thick enough. So I would have had a little bit of a lip between the notch and the Habaki. So instead of folding the copper over, like I've seen a lot of guys do to make the Habaki, I cut it out 3 individual pieces, and then I brazed them together with a bronze brazing rod and my propane oxygen jeweler's torch. So that little part's coming up in a minute. There I'm just fitting all the pieces together before I braze it together. Yeah, so there I'm using a set of vice grips to hold the 3 pieces of copper together, and I'm just heating it up with the torch and then brazing it with the bronze brazing rod. So here I'm just fitting the Habaki over the knife so that I can hammer it into shape, and once I have it hammered down and got a good fit, I can go and finish the brazing of the other side of the Habaki. So there I have the Habaki made, brazed together. It's all one piece, and I'm just sanding it down on the grinder, cleaning it up, checking the fit. Had to do a little bit of filing inside because the brazing tightened up the fit, but I got it to fit pretty good. This is making the Hamon. So I'm applying some clay, letting it dry before I go into heat treat. And just quenching there in Parks 50. Another mistake I made. I should have measured the depth of my can. I didn't quite get the blade all the way in. There was about an inch or so, which didn't make it into the quench, so it didn't get hardened. Now I've done the heat treat and the tempering, and I'm doing all my hand sanding before I do the etching. I found that using a flashlight helps me see the scratch marks from as I go up in grit. It helps to see if you've removed all the scratches from the previous grit. And there I'm doing the etching in ferric chloride for just a few minutes. So I'm still working on the Hamon process. I can get the Hamon. Doesn't always come out exactly like I planned. This is probably the 4th or 5th one I've done. So I'm still learning process. So now I'm starting to make the handle and the saya. That's bird's eye maple. Marking it out and then cutting it out. Some of the history of the KAIKEN is pretty interesting. Samurai carried this knife, both men and women. It was primarily one of the 3 main knives or swords, along with the wakizashi and the katana. And it was primarily used for close quarter combat, where there maybe wasn't enough room to use the katana. So close quarter combat and self-defense. The women also carried it, and were gifted the knife by the groom's family and were expected to carry it at all times, and may have even used it for ritual suicide. It's actually still a culturally significant knife today in Japan. So that's a piece of water buffalo horn that I'm using, cutting that out to go on the end of the handle. And making the pin to go in the handle there. This copper rod that I used for the pin. When I get the handle done, I could work on the saya. So after I trace it out, I score it with a X-Acto knife so that when I'm doing the chiseling, I can keep a smooth edge instead of having the wood flake off or chisel away. Scoring it first with that razor helps. The KAIKEN was really meant to be hidden and not shown. So most of them had very little decorations or ornaments that were displayed. The translation actually means bosom knife or breast knife, and many times it was carried in the chest area or in the sleeve and hidden out of plain sight. So I really just tried to keep the design as basic and simple as possible. Really didn't use any metal for the handle other than the pin. So here I'm starting the Kurikata, which I also made out of a piece of buffalo horn. This buffalo horn I picked up at a pet store. It was a dog chew. Paid about $8 for it. It works great for making knives. Polishes up real nice. And the Kurikata is what was attached to the saya to hold the Sageo, or string or rope, which was used to attach it to the person. So I made a little notch in the saya so that the Kurikata would fit nice and snug in there. Once I had it cut and filed down, I polished it up on the buffer, give it a nice deep black finish, and then epoxied it. Wasn't sure what the traditional way to attach that was, so I used epoxy. And there I'm just putting the Sageo on in a traditional style knot, which took me about 20 minutes to do. It wasn't easy. I think it's probably takes some practice. And that's pretty much it. That's the finished knife. This knife, it's pretty sharp. It's got about a 10-inch blade. And you can see it close up there. I thought the Habaki turned out okay on it. And that's it, the finished product. Hope you liked it, and thanks for watching. See you next time.